The biggest challenge is people, is getting the right people on the FinOps team and keeping them.
Uh, I
Uh,
have known some organizations who have a centralized FinOps team, but they do not have a CCO, right? So how does FinOps fit in with CCOE, and what advantages do you see working as part of CCOE?
Actively reaching out to you, or how can I do better? Instead of waiting for you to review the cost wisdom after the build already finalized with your
One of the CIOs that was present at the conference, he stood up and basically said, like, while everyone's moving to the cloud, we actually use the cloud, and now we're moving back to the data center.
Welcome to the podcast, and our plan is over the next few hours, we are going to cut across a lot of FinOps capabilities and domains and look at these capabilities and domains through the perspective of different personas. We have Ron here, who leads a FinOps team, and Val, who represents a leadership persona as an executive in the company. And then there's Eva, she's a principal, and there's me, I'm a senior associate. All of us are very much invested into FinOps, so we'll be able to see different perspectives of the same capabilities through different personas. And our plan is also to see the difference between how a centralized FinOps team work versus how a decentralized FinOps team works, and what are the pros and cons of both. And that would definitely lead us to see how we do the executive buy-in, because that is one of the things that is reported as the most challenging part of the FinOps during one of their surveys. And we finally want to touch on the biggest question in FinOps: how do you make engineers take action on the FinOps initiatives? So before we jump into, I'll just like to quickly introduce myself. I'm Ashutosh Chandelia. I'm located in India. I graduated as a computer science engineer in 2020, and I was working as a contractor with multiple small Indian companies. And then later, after my graduation, I went to work in a mid-sized consulting firm in New Delhi, where I got to finally explore cloud. And then, like, that is how I stumbled upon FinOps. Like working in the optimization team as part of the cloud operations team there. And we didn't have any term FinOps. I haven't even heard of it until a couple of years ago, because we didn't have a centralized FinOps team, and no one even was looking into the optimization part. And I just took it up. It's like I discovered fire in 2021. I just felt like that. That is how like I got to get into FinOps. And then um, finally, when I had this chance to actually work for a large size organization and be part of the centralized FinOps team, I just took the opportunity and jumped to ZS. And here I am working at ZS almost a year now. And today I'm also joined by my co-host Eva Yu. So she's from Auckland, New Zealand.
Thank you, Ashu. I didn't know you have so fantastic experience. Hello everyone, I'm Eva. I'm coming to you from the beautiful land of Long White Cloud, New Zealand. My career kicked off as an intern at IBM, where I started as a help desk engineer, and I moved into project coordination in the project management office (PMO), and then I also did a couple year of sys ops works as an SNE, and eventually find my way into project management. So since 2018, I've been diving deep into the world of FinOps, and now I'm working as a principal FinOps consultant, working closely with a wide range of customers across New Zealand and Australia. I got a master's in business management. I have a focus on accounting and finance, and I think that helps a lot with the FinOps side of things. Um, yeah, that's about myself.
Thank you so much, Eva. So I guess you have this perfect combination of technology and finance. So I think like you will fit like the best in FinOps. Like that's what we look for in FinOps. So would you like to introduce our guests?
Yeah, sure. Today we have the pleasure of hosting two distinguished guests from the tech industry. Each have decades of experience under their belts. As many of you know, there are different personas in the FinOps practice, as Shu said just now, and each of them play a role. We generally categorize them into two main groups: core personas and allied personas. So, quick knowledge test assure what are core personas and what are allied personas.
So the core personas are the people who are directly involved into the FinOps practice, and the allied personas are the group or the teams that support the FinOps.
You can
Actually.
pass the exam. um, yeah, so as you said, so personas are directly involved in such as people like product managers, engineers, leaders, FinOps practitioners, finance and procurement. And the example of the allied personas are security team, security people. They don't directly engage with FinOps, but still have a significant role to play. So we're thrilled to have two incredible representatives of the core personas with us today. Ron is the FinOps manager for the FinOps practice at the ZS, and Val is the vice president of cloud services and the head of CCOE, and both of them from the global management consulting firm. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I know coordinating three time zones isn't easy, but we made it happen. So this tell me two things. FinOps is a priority in your world, and you are both genuinely passionate about it. Am I right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, no, that's correct. For sure.
All right, so yeah, I can vouch for that. These two guys are totally into FinOps because I see here at ZS, more money we save, the better chance we have to invest more on innovation. So, yep, coming to our guests, Val, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, Val Mushinsky. I've been with ZS for more than 25 years. And I started here a long time ago when the company was relatively small. And initially I was a software developer. In fact, for the first half of my portion of career, I was actually in the development world. So starting as a software developer, working through ranks to a point where I actually was managing most of the software portfolio for ZS. Um, but one of the things that kind of happened over time as we were building our products and solutions over time, not just in our on our desktops, but also started building them to be hosted on first cloud infrastructure, sorry, first web infrastructure, then cloud infrastructure, right? We also identified there's a need to make sure that we have the right type of people that are managing the hosting of those applications and looking across all dimensions, including operations, security, um, and engineering of the deployments and so on and so forth, right? So we ended up building our Cloud Center of Excellence team basically to manage the cloud infrastructure on ZS. And over time, I picked up more and more ownership of that area to a point where about 7, 8 years ago, I decided this is actually going to be my primary responsibility. So about that time, I switched from software development to be fully in infrastructure management and operations. So that's my background.
More power
And
comes with more responsibility, isn't it?
yeah, and I think one of the things that I'll talk about this later, right? But one of the things that happened about 7 years ago as we started getting involved more with cloud solutions is that the number of technologies, the complexity of solutions, and even the technology footprint that we deal with within our day-to-day jobs has pretty much exploded. So with that, we gain additional responsibilities, and FinOps is one of our core responsibilities that we are ensuring that we are really paying attention to.
Fantastic.
Thank you for that introduction, Val. Ron, you want to go now?
Sure. I'm Ron Stein. Many years ago, I graduated college with a degree in economics. After school, I didn't want anything to do with economics, so I entered the world of commercial photography. I found out that I wasn't as good as I thought, so I transitioned to working on the Chicago Board Options Exchange and eventually became a broker. Then I realized I want a job. I don't like a job where I have to stand up all day. So I went back to school, got retooled, and I learned how to program COBOL. This was in the mid to late 90s where Y2K was coming up and companies were looking for COBOL programmers. So I did that for a year or two. Um, got a job with a Dow 30 company. Along the way, I transitioned to more of a technical business analyst. I helped build the first intranet at the Dow 30 company many years ago. Then 18 years ago, I joined ZS as its first QA. And I had the privilege of working with Val on several software projects. Over time, I sort of transitioned to helping our software licensing team. And then I got involved with AWS with Val. Early on, basically just doing cost allocations each month. But then as AWS grew and our footprint grew, and AWS released more tools to help manage costs and reporting, I got more involved in that, and we started showing results. So I was able to build up a team. We started doing FinOps before it was actually called FinOps. And thanks to the J.R. Storment and the FinOps Foundation, who turned FinOps into an actual practice, we just started growing and adding more value to the company and picking up more opportunities along the way.
Yeah, I heard that you both at the FinOps X event this year, right? How did you find it? Is it anything particular interesting?
The big takeaway that I had is that my team and I are very lucky that our top stakeholders, Val and our CIO, are very supportive of FinOps. Not every company is like that. We also have a good relationship with our engineers. I was at one talk where a person in FinOps was talking about it took 6 months for him to get an engineer to actually put a life cycle policy on an S3 bucket, and it was burning thousands of dollars each month, but nobody actually cared because it wasn't their money.
And I kind of agree with that because FinOps is like a operational model and a practice is not something that you do at once and you move on. Yeah. So what about you, Val? Do you find it anything interesting there this year?
Yeah, no, this was actually a pretty great trip. First of all, it's in San Diego, so you can't really refuse that, right? But in reality, and Ron can vouch for it, right? I wasn't actually planning to go, but then when I started looking at the agenda and how many companies are involved in terms of sponsoring the event and how big is the audience, I realized it's actually went from being something really small a couple years ago to like a really big deal. So, for me, besides all the different stories that we heard, like Ron mentioned, right, it was also really great to actually, first of all, see the engagement from the major cloud providers, all three of them plus Oracle, and the other aspect was also being able to kind of pretty much visit every vendor that's involved in this space and learn about what they're doing in the space, like what are the new features they're providing, what are the capabilities they're providing, and kind of compare it to like what we are doing within our organization. We also, and the last part is always it's been quite a bit educational just to learn about new approaches, new thought processes, as well as I think a formal process of how to put a framework together for managing FinOps. I think this is something that Ron will recall. We talked about a year and a half ago when we started looking at maybe a little bit more when we started looking at FinOps organization and their documentation. And to me, like when I find something that actually becomes a concrete definition, like concrete framework with all the different components in terms of responsibilities and goals and objectives. To me, that actually is really helpful, right? And we were actually able to take a lot of information and convert it into specific action items for our team as well. So that just, going to the conference, I think helped to kind of solidify a lot of information and provide additional ideas for the futures as well.
If I'm not wrong, Val, like you are also a certified cloud FinOps practitioner, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great because that's really great for ZS because I cannot think of many companies whose VP of cloud is like so invested in FinOps that they are actually a certified FinOps practitioner.
Yeah. Ron knows this, like, but it's just my nature is like when I find something new, I get so excited about it, I'll go and learn it. So like when we started using AWS initially 6 or 7 years ago, I got excited that I went forward and got my uh, solution architect associate certification and then actually professional certification as well.
Wow, amazing. And now expired, right?
And then now they expired. And the reason for it is actually I was trying to renew the professional certification. But you really need to be very close to day-to-day work to be able to pass that certification. And over time, I kind of I still understand a lot of concepts and I understand a lot of details, but not to the level where I do day-to-day work.
I'm sure you do. I also had those certificate and now also expired. But I'm still
Yeah.
catching up every day because every day there's something new to learn. You never catch up with the new services that they release.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's the other thing is like between the 2 years between my first certification and second time when I tried to renew, there's so many things that have changed that I
Yeah.
couldn't just pass through the certification without going back and study everything again. So I did, and unfortunately, I was off by literally 2 percentage points. So one day I might try it again, but we'll see.
You guys started your career when there was no AWS, then AWS launched with 2 services, and now cloud is so much in demand that now they are just having so many different services, and it's just so hard to keep track of. They just launched with S3 and EC2, if I'm right, and then now it's just like dozens of services just like come and go, and people don't even notice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, keeping up with everything that's going on is really a full-time job, and I think Ron can vouch for it, right? Like we learn something new, like if not every day, but at least every couple of months, or like something that we haven't expected, or something that we need that comes up, and we need to think about, like, well, how can we actually use it in our day-to-day work, or how we can actually maybe take the existing process and modify it once we account for new functionality or new capabilities. And both in AWS as well as just in generally in technology world. I feel like the pace of innovation has been accelerating over the last, well, as far as I can remember, but it keeps accelerating more and more.
Totally.
So anyway, diving right in to our discussions around FinOps. So one of the biggest hurdles that a lot of FinOps practitioners face, as was evident by one of the surveys conducted by the FinOps Foundation, was to get the executive buy-in and also to get the organizational alignment, that people actually take action on the initiatives produced by FinOps team, or the leadership takes the initiative of the FinOps team to the other teams in the organization.
Yep. So I can share one of my examples from one of my clients. So the CTO, who also the head of the cloud cost governance committee, um, he shared an insight during a regular review. So we usually check a metric called days to action, which measure how long it takes each team to act on identified optimization opportunities. So in one of those meetings, the CTO asked one of the team leader why it took them 60 days to take action. So the response was that they were focused on day-to-day BAU operations and haven't prioritized it yet. So the CTO responded by emphasizing the FinOps should be integrated into daily operations, but not treated as an like additional task. So this highlights not only the importance of FinOps team and responsibilities, but also the need to build a culture and and set the expectation in within the organization that FinOps is part of the business as usual (BAU). I think this is powerful as it demonstrates his approval, his commitment, and his advocacy to FinOps, and that's an example of executive buy-in.
I guess like we also have similar cases here, but we are lucky to have a a very well functioning CCOE, so that whatever initiatives we take are very promptly taken up by teams and just taken actions on. But yeah, I can see in that environment where companies do not have a centralized FinOps team, how like having a metrics like day to action would really help.
Mm. So, well, as the vice president and the head of CCOE at a global management consulting firm, I'm curious about your decision to set up the centralized FinOps team, and how do you? Can you just share some your initiative when it's launched and your strategic thinking about building such a practice at the organization?
Yeah, sure. I would say we got a little bit lucky that we kind of got ahead of the game really early on. And one of the things that I remember about 10 years ago when we actually formed CCOE team, which wasn't called CCO back then, but basically the same idea, right?
Yep.
Was One of the things that we were looking at is at that point in time was how do we manage infrastructure consistently across the organization, which was much smaller back then, right? And now it's much bigger organization with a lot more things that are happening. But we were able to again a little bit lucky, right? We were able to define that we really need to have consistency in how we manage our infrastructure and operations. We really need to have a lot of investment into not just to ensure that we can maintain our infrastructure, but also continuously improve it, right? And as I mentioned, like I'm coming from a development background, and we kind of brought this engineering mindset to the whole problem as well, right? So when we were building our team, we thought about like how do we actually automate everything we can in terms of process? How do we standardize in our process? And that was being applied to our physical hosted infrastructure in the data center. When cloud started coming along, right, and we actually saw this with some of our teams, um, we kind of understood that we need a similar approach there. So as Ashutosh mentioned, right, we are a consulting company, meaning that we work with a lot of clients. We actually have a lot of different teams that build solutions for our clients. And initially, when they discovered cloud, right, it was kind of like eye-opening for a lot of our client teams, consulting teams. They're like, oh, wow, we have all those tools that we can use. We have freedom to build new solutions. Let's go and try them out, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you like two stories there. One of the stories is that actually very early on was working with one of those teams for one of the largest pharmaceutical companies. They were working with that company to build a cloud solution for them. And initially, I was looking at what they're building. They brought me in as an expert in technology. I was starting to see some red flags, right? In terms of cost, in terms of architecture, in terms of things like security and compliance and so on and so forth. So that's one story. The second story is actually a year before that. Me and my previous boss, who's the CTO of the company, we actually were participating in one of the local Chicago technical events, and in that event, they were uh, kind of talking about upcoming cloud usage and experiences different companies have, and one of the CIOs that was present at that conference, he stood up and basically said, like, while everyone's moving to the cloud, we actually use the cloud, and now we're moving back to a data center. And people were like, well, why are you guys doing that? He's like, it's really easy. We kind of opened access to developers, they started using the cloud, and everything's been going great, except when I get a bill at the end of a month. And I have no idea where those costs are coming from. And every month I get a bigger and bigger bill to a point where I said, stop, we're not going to be doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So, we heard that story, we heard the first story and the second story, right? And we basically said that we probably need to have a much more meaningful
Stronger,
approach to that problem space, right?
yeah, and stronger governance around that.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that led to, first of all, creation of the Cloud Center of Excellence, or sorry, we already had the Cloud Center of Excellence, but it led to creation of a team that started getting involved in governing the architecture, design, and implementation of cloud solutions. And the second part, we also understood that we really need to have pretty good accounting for any finances related to the cloud. Again, us being a consulting organization, we wanted to make sure that we can allocate the costs with the teams that are building solutions for the clients, right? So if team A spending $10,000 and team B spending $20,000, you want to make sure that the money finds their way to the right team, right? So that, for two reasons. One, that make sure that all that money doesn't kind of sell in a centralized enterprise cost bucket. And the second reason is also becomes a motivator for each team to ensure that they look at their finances and they try to optimize their environments, right? So that was the initial model. So that's step one. And Ran was the key person who actually took up the responsibility for that initial stage, building out the model, and then working with all the different stakeholders across the organization to make sure that we can distribute the costs, and then working with finance team to make sure that we actually, are in lockstep with them in how we approach the process. So that was one first step, right? And then, at that point of time, we relied on our individual development teams to manage their finances costs, right? And what we observed over time is that the sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't work as well, right? Not everyone knew how to use different savings mechanisms that cloud provides. Not everyone was paying to their to their finances, right? And then the last part is like when you look at each individual team, right? They might say, we are spending this much. We could potentially save a little bit of money if we did some reservations or something else, but it's not worth it. Let's not bother with it. But as the usage has grown, when we started looking at that number globally, right, that number actually became much more tangible. So at the individual team level, it might not make sense for them to think about those savings plans or ways to optimize, but globally, it makes a lot of sense for the organization. And that's when we started introducing the second layer of actual cost optimization. And then I'll let Ron cover the rest because there's a lot more nuances there, but that's kind of how we got here.
Yeah, speaking of governance issues, I just brought up a memory. Wasn't there a project team back in like 2016 or 17 that bought a 3-year reserved instance and totally it was for the wrong it was just a fiasco.
Yeah, I
But
mean, mistakes happen, right? And I think there's like in anything, right? you can kind of do things based on what you know, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work as well. But if you have experts, right, for example, in our centralized team, we definitely have really world experts in a lot of those concepts. They can look at it and actually think through this end to end and validate that this actually is meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah, I also remember around 2017. So our customers want to do some reserve instance, but it's just so overwhelming, and need to have 2 pairs, 3 pairs of eyes to double check, and it's like still like really hesitant to hit the button. But from what I heard from you, I think your thinking is very advanced because you have those mindset like 10 years ago when you think about potential cost blowout, and you need a stronger governance around that, and you also think about cost allocation to the products or to the solution for your customers, each solution you build. That is the major problem that many New Zealand organizations are facing now. So many cases there's only one bucket, and no cost allocation or unclear cost allocation is just making things harder, and many organizations just start to think about this problem.
Yeah, I know. As I mentioned, I started with just cost allocation. But then one day, Val came to me that we purchased AWS through a reseller, and the reseller approached Val to have them handle savings plans. I don't think they existed then, but reserved instances and modernization and all that for mid-six figures. And we don't like spending money. We like building from within. So Val asked me to look into it, and I hired a person. There were no FinOps people back then, so you couldn't look at LinkedIn resumes for FinOps because that wasn't there. So we found a finance graduate who had some computer programming experience, and he was great. He helped develop basically our strategy, not our strategy, but our day-to-day process of how we review our accounts and purchase savings plans and look for waste. Then he got poached by a recruiter and left. So we had to start all over again. So this time, FinOps people still didn't exist. So he was located in Chicago with us, but this time we looked in India, which is where most of our technology teams are located. So there would be more opportunity for our FinOps people in India to work during business hours with our technology teams. So I found we've hired 3 people, and they had master's degrees in economics. So I looked at FinOps back then was looking at the data, analyzing it, and figuring out what level of reserved instance should we buy, what level of savings plan. And then we just kept training and developing our skill set and adding more abilities and tools to our kit. I think the most important thing that we can do as FinOps is we have something that other personas don't have, and that's information. And it's our job to put the right information into the hands of stakeholders on our project teams so they can make decisions as to what's more valuable to them. Because one team might value speed of execution, another might value cost, and there's a trade-off between the two.
Yeah.
So we built reporting tools. We have a reporting vendor that we use. So we send reports, then anomaly detection. We do pretty well at identifying spikes.
Mm.
Unfortunately, like 95 or more % are expected. So we want to fine tune that over the next year as to how we can cut down the number of alerts that we send out, but have them more meaningful. And now something that Ashutosh is doing is setting up budget alerting and forecasting using AWS tools. So we can put that information into the hands of the managers who are managing their projects. And so try to remove FinOps from us evaluating the information to putting specific information into the hands of stakeholders.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say that is the most important phase because that's the first principle of FinOps or the first pillar of the FinOps, right? Like the inform phase. And just to, I think I remember this example very well that we were sending out. So in my last organization, the case was that we just they were consulting, but I was looking over the Azure environment where most of the development would happen. And then we would just send out teams these recommendations, that if you execute these steps, then you will be saving 28% of your cost. You will be saving $20,000 over the next few months, right? And none of them would even revert back to that email. They will just let the $20,000 flow. It is just being charged on the company bill or whatever, or maybe they're just occupied with their existing work, right? So like it just went on for a couple of months, and then as soon as we started allocating cost, like we didn't even have to send out that email. They found out the old email that they had, and they started replying back to that. Okay, so a couple of months ago you were talking about saving cost. Is it still will it still work for me? And talking about that, Ron, so I would just like to understand. So many different companies have a FinOps team, even a centralized FinOps team, but they do not have a CCOE. Because in my last organization, we did not even had a centralized FinOps team, but I have known some organizations who have a centralized FinOps team, but they do not have a CCOE, right? So how does FinOps fit in with CCOE, and what advantages do you see working as part of CCOE?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what I find most valuable is building partnerships with the different teams within CCOE, our compute team, our data warehouse team, our storage team, and trying to find that right balance between what is our job and what is their job. And more importantly, how can we help them? And the answer is to help them get more information more quickly or easier to help identify what needs to be done. And so I think that is very helpful.
I can tell that you guys are totally on the right track and doing the right things: budgeting, alerting, anomaly detection, forecasting, cost allocation, etc. So I see many challenges from the customers. One of them is they don't think this way. They just think that cost optimization or cost out at all time, and they think this as a one-off exercise, and they just do it as a project and then move on. The FinOps practice and the capability doesn't exist at all within the organization. But in your case, your company, you build up the whole FinOps practice, which is like amazing. Like this is what we need here. So Ron, as a FinOps manager for a global organization, what is the biggest challenge that you see?
The biggest challenge is people, is getting the right people on the FinOps team and keeping them. Now everybody is so proud of what they do. We all update our LinkedIn profiles. Hey, we're doing this. This is great. I got this certification and badge, which is all great. I do it too. But it leads to recruiters reaching out. So you have to find a path for people to be interested. When I interview people, I tell them, okay, half of the job you're not going to like, but it's stuff we have to do. But the other half, I want to find something that challenges you, that's interesting. So what I try to do is look for the end result. What do we need? Like Val mentioned at one time, he would like us to create scorecards for our project teams. How well are they doing? So now I've challenged Ashutosh and another member of our team, go ahead and build it. What sort of KPIs should we use? And they're trying to figure it out. We talk back and forth, trade ideas, but I'm leaving it up to them to challenge themselves and become interested and try to figure out the puzzle. And I think that's the key to keeping people.
That sounds really interesting, like an interesting practice and a team to work in. But unfortunately, many of my customers see this as like a extra burden for them, and it's not like their responsibility. So it's hard to hold people accountable for what they are using in the cloud. That is the biggest challenge here.
We don't have that problem because we're very good at cost allocation. So our managers in charge of the projects see their charges each month, and they always reach out to us. Why is our cost higher than last month? So then we have to look, okay, this EC2 instance ran 30% more, and that's why your costs are going up. And then
So
figure out
people are more proactively reaching out to you, or how can I do better? Instead of waiting for you to review the cost with them after the build already finalized retrospectively.
That's where we want to be with budgets and alerting before the bill comes at the end of the month, so they can see what they're doing early in the month and make any corrections that might be needed, or reach out to us. Hey, what can we do? And then we may need to bring in other members of CCLE, or most likely we do, our compute experts or our storage experts. Why is our storage cost increasing? So our engineers can dig in to the details and provide a beneficial answer.
Right.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted
Fantastic.
to mention is that besides cost optimization and trying to make sure that everyone gets very transparent information about their usage, I think the other goal is for us to try to avoid surprises as much as possible, right? Because surprises, especially when it comes down to financials, are never very pleasant, right? I mean, unless it's a good surprise, right, where you save more money than you expected. But if you have a team that ended up spending way more money than expected, and they find out about only a month later, by the time it comes to us, this might be a big problem, right? And we've seen this before, and we don't want that to happen. So as much of a learning predictability and projections as we can add in place to minimize those type of events, something that we definitely would invest into as much as possible.
Yeah, totally. In the cloud, every minute counts. You cannot wait.
Yep.
So like
Yep.
do ever
And this
any
is the other. This is sorry, but this is like the other thing, right? It's like even monthly billing, you might miss something, right? You might have a spike that ended up spending $10,000 in a matter of a day. So we need to have things that are looking consistently at our costs and predicting potential overspend and correlating to any potential budgets that we might have in place to avoid the surprises.
Yep.
or like do they ever like reach out to you and ask you, like we might have gone over our budget a lot this month, could you just let the bill go, or maybe just like make some adjustments for me? So like how do you manage such conflicting situations if that ever occur?
Yeah, no, that has happened where a manager comes to me and says, my team left this EMR cluster running for 2 weeks and nobody noticed. Can you get a refund from AWS? And the answer is no. AWS is very generous when it comes to optimization tools and credits for new initiatives, but if you spent it, used it, you pay for it. There's really no way to hide the cost. Somebody at the company is going to have to pay for it.
Mm.
So it's just a matter of finding which pocket it should go to.
Yeah, and I can confirm that, you know, I have gone through some conversation with our top management or top leadership of the company when some of the things like not necessarily in this space, but like similar spaces have happened, right? And no one wants the money to sell in the enterprise budget or in the non-allocatable budget, right? But then the conversation that, you know, you have accidentally spent extra, you know, let's say 20 or $30,000 that you didn't have in the budget for this project, and now they're going to be assigned to your project, and your margins are going to go down. It's never a pleasant conversation for any client team.
I could totally imagine. I wouldn't want to be in that room if that conversation was taking place.
Yeah,
So
so as
like,
much as we can avoid it,
mhm.
we'll do whatever we can do to
And
try
that's
to
where,
detect those and avoid those.
yeah, and that's where
Sorry.
anomaly detection comes in, where we want to better, fine tune that to give the alert so they don't end up with a $30,000 surprise. Maybe it's only going to be a $5,000 surprise.
Mm. The other metrics that we use is how quick you take action when shit happen. So that's another capability. It's okay if it happened and you learn from it. Of course, we try to avoid that. But the other thing, the other KPI or capability we should have is how quickly we can action and turn things around.
Yeah, and it actually is a bit more complicated in consult organization because we don't necessarily control all the resources. So, you know, if something happened due to a mistake on the implementation team, you know, they're the ones that need to fix it, right? So basically it becomes this whole thing. How quickly can you detect? How quickly can you alert? How quickly can they react? Right. So any leading indicators before that could actually help in the story as well, right? But yeah, that is you know, the other aspect, I think this is where we are going as well, is democratizing the information, meaning that getting the information to the people who are responsible for implementation, getting information into their hands as quickly as possible, maybe to a point where it's like live information, right? Where you know, they can see their costs, they can see their budgets, they can see their forecast, and they can get alerted or see deviation as soon as it happens.
Totally.
Perfect. So like, just adding on to this, anomalies, cloud cost anomalies, and specifically if those anomalies are not something that just occurs every hour. Let's say a project is going up by 5% in cloud cost every month. So we know, like, by the end of the year, it would be way higher, and it wouldn't be captured by any anomaly detectors. And if the person who is like whose team ends up paying the cost is not very proactively looking at it at even at the 5% a monthly increase, then that could lead to a very detrimental um, actions in that particular project, right? So Val, my question to you is like, in the data centers, when we had data centers and we didn't have the cloud, we knew like, so we have this much data storage, this much compute power, and this is going to be our monthly bill. And now once we have started using cloud and we have like technically unlimited storage, unlimited compute resources, and all that stuff, and most of the engineers have access to it, and most of the teams have access to it, and they use it. So how do you still keep benefiting from the variable cost model of the cloud and still drive the business forward without making it a negative thing for the business?
Yeah, so that's where I mentioned the democratization of information comes in, right? Being able to kind of give the right type of controls and information to the teams that are doing the work. So, to your question is it's not, this is one of the things that we saw with the cloud when we initially looked at it 7 years ago, but that's not the state we are in right now. One of the reasons why we created CCOE was to actually build different types of controls and mechanisms to be able to control the surface areas of what developers and engineers see, and not necessarily completely open the cloud for their usage. So, one of, because there are multiple dimensions that come into play, right? And cost is definitely one of them, but we also need to look at things like security, compliance, um, data management and so on and so forth, right? So we need to make sure that we can allow development teams to build their solutions or their products, but in a way that are still compliant with all the practices that we need to have in place. One of the things that I should mention is that we primarily work with life science industry, right? It means that a lot of our data that we host is highly regulated, right? It's needs to be protected. We want to make sure that no data leaks from one client to another, and we need to make sure that we have a lot of security controls on top of it. So we build different frameworks, uh, different type of solutions that we give developers to use, and so they utilize those as opposed to like directly going onto AWS console and spinning up the infrastructure themselves. So that's something that's definitely there. All right, it's and helps to mitigate the risk and helps to also control the costs in a lot of ways. Um, the other thing that we do, right, we also um, look at things like architecture for new solutions coming in. If it's a new solution is being built, it's using a standard architecture that we already have pretty well defined, great, right? They can move pretty quickly. But if the team is trying to use something new, right, something that we haven't tried before, some new services or some new technologies, we want to make sure that we understand how they work together with what we already have, how we can support it, how much it will cost, what are the implications of the overall security posture of our environment.
I can already see that there's a framework in Val's head. So he mentioned on one hand, you need to give freedom to the developer to use cloud. On the other hand, you need to set the guardrail and governance to set the constraint for them to, while they are using it for renovation. And he also mentioned architect framework, security and compliance, all those kind of stuff. I think that's how you think about it, right? And it's the whole framework. It's not one component of thing. You cannot do that without missing other parts of the practice and framework.
Yeah, it's also bringing some discipline to the whole process as well. So Ron can speak to this quite a bit as well, right? Like, but when developers, and sorry, this is like coming from development state of mind, right? Sometimes, like when developers write code, right, they don't really think about implication of how that code will run in the infrastructure. So when it gets down to hosting that solution, they might necessarily think through all the questions that they should, right? And some of those questions could be, what size of a server do I need, right? And we will get requests where someone will say, well, I need the server to be this large because then for sure my application won't fail. It will be fast enough,
Yeah.
right? But do you realize how much it costs? Have you looked at the performance of your application? Maybe it makes sense to optimize your application and you basically invest one time to rewrite some of the code there, rather than getting a real large server and paying, $50,000 more each year for it.
Yeah, so just remind me of a very recent example. So one of the our customer, they have a like a guideline said after 3 months after you have a VM or EC2 in the cloud, you need to revisit and look at the utilization and resize it as needed, right? And then I was looking at this 5% CPU memory usage. I said, why is it running like 5% for more than 1 year, while you have a standard to revisit after 3 months? And then the customer say, because nobody following it. so so it's like they have a standard, but there's no enforcement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ron can speak to it, right? Like we have, like you need to have both sides of the equation.
Totally.
Well, like I had the similar case in my last organization. So we needed to automate some parts of the task, and let's assume that task was costing us $100 in man hours. So a very bright, I guess he was an intern back then, so he created this whole program, invested months and months to create this whole program to automate a particular task, and Ron would definitely agree to it. So he automated this whole task, and that task would run on a very big server, and then that server just costed more than what he was trying to save. And I guess it's one of Ron's phrases that I initially did not understand, but now now that I have transferred more into a centralized FinOps team, now I see it more happening in real world, that engineers like to automate, but then they usually don't really think about the cost, as Val mentioned. So that's a very big problem while we address them. So Ron, coming from the automation part, so how much automation do you think is required, and when do you think like the automation doesn't make sense anymore?
Yeah, so 7, 8 years ago, we had maybe 10 linked accounts in our AWS organization. Now it's triple digits. So automation comes in more handy. But going back to the previous point about engineers and what Val said about engineers don't think about their cost implications. One thing we want to do is develop structured KPIs, which we would need to automate the calculation of those APIs, but try to make it meaningful for the software applications that our engineers build within ZS, and then measure it against future releases, so that if the next release that one of the KPI metrics starts going up, we can inform them at the earliest, so they can hopefully take a look at it and make a bug fix or an improvement in the application. But I think that is somewhere where I think we would be add more value to our project teams and our engineers.
And talking about the project team, so coming back to the biggest question that I usually see being discussed in all the FinOps groups and on gatherings, being the manager of the global FinOps, global FinOps team at ZS, how do you make sure that whatever FinOps initiatives that you put on the table, the project teams and the business teams take follow up on it and take action on it?
That is a predicament or an issue. The managers of our project teams are super busy. They're super busy focusing on the operation of the current project, and they're super busy trying to sell future projects. So getting their attention isn't always the easiest. We just sort of have to pick and choose what's the most beneficial to them, or try to find somebody else in their team who will listen and take action.
Yeah, because this is where this whole executive buy-in comes in. Once the FinOps team has a support from there and they are aware of the initiatives, So, and once they buy into the FinOps initiatives, then I guess the teams are more able to work more flawlessly and take more initiatives and actually take actions for optimizations and cost saving.
Yeah, it's not always that easy. Um, like with our software teams that develop applications that are hosted on AWS, they're balancing CCOE recommendations to reduce costs with adding new features, with bug fixes. Um, it's a tricky balance
Yeah.
as what gets done.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes
you
it's
know,
also about the speed and performance and cost trade-off.
you know, and to your point, right? Like we have buy-in about what FinOps team does across overall leadership of CS, right? So, as Ran mentioned, or Ashutosh mentioned, right, we have buy-in from CIO. We actually do pretty frequent check-ins with our COO as well. So she's very well aware of what the team does, and we, even do sometimes presentations to all our key shareholders as well. So that we have, right? But then the thing is that what happens on the ground on day-to-day basis, right? And not everyone might be following the same playbook that leadership has, right? So
Yeah.
we are a relatively large organization, right? And as you can guess, we constantly adding people. People join the organization, people leave the organization. So we need to constantly educate our users and provide them
Yep.
information um, and continue the conversation, right? And sometimes we have to pick our battles too, right? Some things might be worth getting much deeper engagement, and sometimes there might be things we share, while they could be positive, they might not be worth the investment. So a little bit of balance there as well. But I
Right.
think the one nice thing about our organization is that we always try to look at from the perspective, what is the right thing to do for the organization? What is the right thing to do for our people? What is the right thing to do for our customers, right? And that's how we balance our values.
Mm. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think the continuous education about FinOps is a good point. And also, I appreciate that you appreciate that the FinOps is not easy. Like many people don't appreciate that and they think that FinOps is a thing that we can do and deliver in a box. But
Yeah.
it's
yeah,
not. You need to build your capability like from the start, and you need to learn over time and get better.
that's interesting. In 2021, when we're rebuilding our team, I thought, okay, we need to analyze savings plans, RIs, find waste, modernization, right sizing. Once we get all those tools in place and cost allocation, we'll be set. So we reach that, and then now it's like there's so much more to do. But
Exactly,
it
I
was
know.
one of the messages at FinOps X this year. So as you know, FinOps has 3 stages: crawl, walk, and run. Um,
There's no.
right, depending on the maturity and whatnot. But this year, the message at FinOps X was there is no run. You don't get to the point where you've done everything. Uh,
Mm.
there's always more maturity to your organization. So on one hand, that was really depressing. Um, but on the other hand, it's just challenging. What else can we be doing? How can we grow? How can we listen to other FinOps experts or teams and try to do what they're doing or make it work within our environment?
Well,
Mm.
I have to mention that this is actually not unique to FinOps, right? I mean, it's a similar story, for example, for security space, right? It's a similar story for even the like general cloud technology as well, right? And that's because we just live in a much more dynamic world these days, right? Things are not static anymore, right? We're not dealing with a fixed data center. We are dealing with constantly new innovations coming in, new technologies that are being introduced. In the case of security, new holes that hackers find. So it's just the dynamic nature of the thing, which actually makes things, on one hand, makes it complicated. On the other hand, it makes things pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole. um, one of my customers, like one of the team is pretty mature, and they have done right sizing and reserve instance and all those kind of optimization. Now they're thinking about serverless, but they didn't have enough knowledge or really didn't spend enough time um, doing the research on switching to or transitioning into serverless, but end up the cost is bigger and the performance is not necessarily really better than previously. Um, so that's another topic we would like to talk about, but I guess we don't have time today. But it's interesting, and I'm also interested in the architect framework and how architects think about FinOps.
I'd be curious to how they think about FinOps as well.
The other thing is last year, at the FinOps Act event, there's a big topic about shifting left, which is like shifting all the, not all the, many responsibility to the engineers, architects, and people from the tech side. And talking to one of my friends, and I said, what do you think about this? He's an engineer, and then he said, yeah, we do everything and other people not doing anything. So I guess it's just like a balance, and everybody, as we said at the beginning, there are many personas in the practice, and everybody have a role to play, and that's what made the practice better and efficient.
I
I
think
mean,
especially
shift left is a great idea, by the way, and that definitely came up. I think one of the things that, in my experience, and we've gone through a number of those things, as I mentioned, like we shift the responsibilities for some of the cloud management aspects to development teams by giving them tools, right? And we're planning to do similar things for some of the security components as well, right? And the key thing there is that to be able to shift left, right, you need to first of all provide the right tools and technologies and guidance to the development teams, right? Um, and then, but the second thing, you also need to have a way to continue monitor the compliance and all the different metrics of how that actually is working out, right? So that if something is not working as expected, you can follow up with the relevant teams. Because let's say if you shift left the responsibility for managing the optimization of the environment to developers, but don't give them the tools, they might not do things
Yep.
right. And on the other hand, if you don't monitor what they actually do, or you don't collect the KPIs, you might find some surprises as well in that case.
Yeah, you need to give them the right tools and the right framework and constraint to follow.
I think
Yeah.
even cloud service providers are supporting this initiative, pushing to its left, because AWS recently launched that you can actually measure the usage to the very node level in your EKS clusters and also in your ECS services. And then they are like all the cloud service providers have agreed to send out their cost and usage report in the focus format so that it could be integrated at as one. So it's really good to see, like if like a FinOps is bringing all the different CSPs on the same table, and people will finally be able to use all the different CSPs without thinking that like we will have to manage three different environments.
Great. By the
Yeah.
way, I was going to mention this is like another thing. It's actually pretty exciting to be kind of like in the process of framework or in the process of this type of industry being built out, right? Like it's actually pretty interesting to observe like how FinOps is becoming more mature practice area and be able to participate in both implementing it as well as hopefully influencing the direction.
Yeah, there's definitely another topic that we can dive down next time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I guess we're already touching the time. So just let me know if you guys ever want to do a second part of this podcast,
Sure, let's bring in some architects.
or maybe
That will be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think expanding the audience would be pretty interesting, right? So that we can get some insights from, like Ron mentioned, architects, maybe developers, maybe additional stakeholders. So that would be fun.
Mm,
yeah, yeah. And especially like
cool.
if you two guys ever visit India together, and then we can have a face to face like the big podcasting. And Eva, don't worry about it. You will be on the big screen. We have like a lot of big screens here, so you will be there.
Okay. Thank you very much, all of you, for taking time for this podcast. It's interesting conversation, and if you guys in New Zealand, you would set a really good example here. Really impressive.
I'll put it on the bucket list to visit New Zealand at some point in my life.
I'm pretty sure Ron will be there in a few months. Like he,
Oh, are you,
yeah,
what?
yeah,
No,
he just listens about a place and then he he has to visit it.
no, I'm thinking of where to retire, where would be
Oh,
safe from global warming and
yeah.
everything else.
And
Mm,
New Zealand sounds like a good place. Like they're just like too far from anything to ever,
too far from anywhere.
you know.
Mm, all right.
All right, guys. So it was really amazing having you, and thank you so much for joining in because this was really interesting to talk about, and we got to see a lot of different perspectives. And Eva, you have a good day. Ron and Val, you have a good evening ahead. I hope it's okay to call it a evening now, Ron.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for this opportunity. This was a fun discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Thank you, Ashutosh and Eva. This was great.
Thank you, guys. All right. See
Thank
you soon.
Bye.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.